Thank you guys. That was awesome. Oh Lord, John. I'm so glad you made it. Uh, it's really good to see you back in the house. And Brent, we talked earlier. It's good to see you back. You know, these men's meetings we have quarterly. Um, we've seen some powerful things happen. We've been up on the hill. We've can we get the lights on? Up on the hill the first time, it was a good time. We had a lot of fun. And every time we do something like this, it gets a little bit better. We try not to mix it up a little bit. We have some fun. One time we did a movie, and that was fun. How is Lily? Awesome. Those of you that don't know about Lily, the first time we met up on the hill, she was cancer and not doing well. We prayed for her that day. We prophesied over her that day. And she's doing well for almost 2 years now. At that time, when we hit that first time on the hill, David was at stage 4 cancer. My brother there, he's now in remission. Cancer for what? About 1.5 years now. Can't count that high? It's yeah. Well, you've been looped since I've known you. I know. I had a working title when I started this, and I'm going to share it with you because it gives you food for thought. And it was a God made man in his God made man in his image. Then man returned to favor and remakes God in his image. That is truer than I really want to care to admit. We want God to be what we want him to be. And we have an expectation that he's going to do what we want to do, want him to do. And it's one thing my walk with the Lord has shown me is that's not how it works. Now, I picked on the pastor because he stole my story last Sunday, but that's okay. Hey, good material is all fair game. So I'm going to start with this story of an older woman lives near a large river. It'd been raining for days and weeks, and the river was rising over its banks. And the woman is praying fervently to the Lord to save her. And the water's coming up, and you can hear the roar of the river. You hear the roar of the river, and she's out there, and she's praying to God to send an eagle to carry her away. And then a jeep shows up, and a man comes out, "Come with me, the river's rising." And the woman says, "The Lord is going to send an eagle, and I'm going to fly away on the back of that eagle." And the guy in the jeep just argues with her, and finally he gives up and leaves. The river continues to rise. The river continues to rise, totally engulfs the house. She's looking out the second floor window. The house is totally underwater, first floor. Guy in a boat shows up, says, "Come with me to safety. The river's rising and you're going to die." And the woman says, "The Lord is going to send me an eagle, and I'm going to fly away on the back of it." And the man argues with her, and finally he goes on his way. Time goes up, the river continues to rise. He's on the top of the roof, hanging on the chimney for dear life, and a helicopter comes by. And the guy says, "Grab my hand. I will take you to safety." And the woman says, "The Lord's going to send an eagle. I'm going to rise on his back and go to safety, and the Lord will save me." and the helicopter moved on. And obviously the river continued to rise, and the woman was washed away and died. And she gets to heaven, and she meets the Lord, and she goes, "Lord, why didn't you save me?" And the Lord looks at her and says, "I sent a guy in a jeep, a guy in a boat, and a guy in a helicopter." You know, we laugh at that, but don't we do the same thing? We have an expectation of what God's going to do for us. We have an expectation that God's going to do to us exactly what we want him to do. We've even got the address, the color of the car, whatever it is. It's ridiculous. This is the creator of the universe, and we're making demands. And what's really sad is I am guilty of this. We put God in a box. We limit what God will do because we, in our human capacity, have an idea what needs to happen. And we don't have a clue what God is capable of doing beyond our wildest dreams. You know, my wife and I, we got together some 26, 27 years ago, and it was like a bus running into a train. It was a financial wreckage. She had tax burdens. I had credit card debt. We got saved, and early on I'd been convicted by God that I couldn't declare bankruptcy, and if I did declare bankruptcy, I was going to have to pay it off anyway, because I signed on a dotted line, and I was committed to that I would pay that off. And I was reading stories, and I was hearing things, and I would hear that people would turn their finances over to the Lord, and they were being paid off in a couple of months. And I'm going, that's not so bad. Now understand, I came to the church. As I walked across that parking lot for the first time with my wife, I looked at her and I says, "Don't you dare tell them how much money we make." Because I was saved just after all the scandals in the 90s. Or I was going to church just after that, and it's like, all they want is our money. The only reason I was coming to church is because my daughters needed to go to church. I didn't need anything. So we came to church. I was convicted. I was actually convicted. I actually accepted Christ on a tithing message. That's not exactly your typical salvation message. Money was a big deal to me because I didn't have any. And so I was $30,000 in debt my yearly salary was $50,000. Everybody told me, declare bankruptcy. The Lord said no. So I bullied my creditors into letting me make payments. I bullied them. I said, what do you care if I fail? If I fail, I declare bankruptcy, you get nothing. If I pay it off, you win. And so even though I was like negative 500 in a hole every month, I started this journey. And I'm sitting there listening to all these stories, all these miraculous stories of people paying things off in a couple, 3 months. Well, let me tell you something. It took us 5 years. It was 5 years of one day away from having the lights shut off. The lights never were shut off. One day away from being evicted. We were never evicted. One day away from catastrophic failure. 5 years we marched that out. We paid that $30,000 off. And blood and sweat every inch of the way. And there was no way, money would come out of nowhere. I will share you a story. I was probably about 6 months into this journey, and I was convicted that I had to tithe during this whole repayment process. And I had a Sunday, I couldn't tithe, I was so depressed. I felt like I had failed God. And I just pleaded to God that day, God, if you want this to work, I need $200 to come out of nowhere. And I prayed that, and I don't know, I felt this nudge to go clean my truck, which was desperately in need of cleaning. And I found a briefcase that I had left at a hotel for 6 months. I left it there and picked it up like 6 months later. It was in the lost and found still. And I'm going through this briefcase. And I'm going through all the papers. And in all those papers, 2 $100 bills. 2 $100 bills. And I showed my wife, and she couldn't believe it. And they looked like they were fresh off the printing press. You know, and so that was 6 months into a 5-year journey. And that day, God gave me a vision. And that God said, I was looking forward through a jungle. It was awful. Animals, snakes, lions, tigers, and bear, oh my. And all of a sudden there was a path through the jungle. And then that path closed off. And God told me, I says, you're only going to give you enough to see one day. I'm going to give you enough to see the path for one day. You're just going to have to trust there is a way through that jungle. And we went through that jungle. We got it. We paid everything off. And that was miraculous. We took half the church out to dinner. We were so happy. And the best thing was, I think we took like 25 people. I think, Jake, did you go to that? I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But we took Pastor Doug. We took a whole bunch of people. We took them out to dinner. 25 people. It cost us $200 because people were bringing us coupons. And dinner was just amazing. You know, we celebrated that. And here's the best part of that 5 years of no money. I was traveling a lot for work. And because I was staying out so many nights a week, I was accumulating free nights. I was able to take my kids on vacation places. I was able to take other people with us. We went to Niagara Falls. We went down into the Poconos. We didn't do much when we got there, but we went. I've talked to my daughter Kaylee. She's 26 now. And I was talking to her. I said, I'm really sorry that I couldn't provide a better childhood for you. And she says, Dad, we went everywhere. We went all over New York State. We went to every free thing and there was in the state. We ate ham sandwiches in the freaking hotels, but we had a good time. They don't remember that as a struggle. I find that miraculous to me. So we got through that. We're debt free. We buy us a house. We put our kids in private school because we did not like what was going on in the schools. We did all this. And then my wife gets sick. It's Good Friday. She was complaining her stomach was hurting. And all of a sudden, all the color went out of her face. She says something snapped inside of her. And I took her to the emergency room that Good Friday. And they took her into the emergency room. We went to the emergency room and we got in immediately. And the doctor goes up to her, sends her out for a sonogram, and says, you've ruptured your colon. You need emergency surgery now. Now, it was amazing. My wife and doctors don't get along on a good day. Scream and yell. It was nightmarish getting her into the surgery that day. They did the surgery. The surgeon came out 8 o'clock that night and says the surgery was a success. My wife was in a coma, chemically induced coma, to let her heal. And I'm going, this is great, this is wonderful. The next day, she slept. And they said, well, we're going to have to teach you how to take care of your wife because they've put a colostomy bag on her until her colon heals. She was basically out of it for a week. But I remember going in there, and the nurse says, you're going to have to learn to do this. And I'm going, learn how to do what? He says they had to leave the stomach. They cut her from her pubic hair to her rib cage. And they left it open. And 2 to 3 times a day, I was supposed to pack this. I was supposed to clean it all out and pack it. Now, I am a pump mechanic. I am not a doctor, nurse, anything that can do that stuff. The first time they opened that wound, it looked like they field dressed her. It smelled like they'd field dressed her. And it was awful. And I could stick my fingers in to my knuckles. It was not a lot of fun. I'm like, God, I can't do this. And he says, you're going to have to do it 3 times a day. And it's like, I'm going to need help. And my 12-year-old daughter volunteered to help. She came in, took one look at it, walked out of the room, and then came back. For the next 4 months, I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I would clean that wound and I would repack it. My daughter would come home after school and clean that wound and repack it. And at 10 o'clock at night, I would clean that wound and repack it. It was 4 months. You know, you talk about expense that insurance don't cover. We were spending $200 a week on gauze. They would pack it. It was like the first time I packed it, they said, well, you're going to need about 4 rolls of gauze, and they just threw it in the hole. And I'm like, I can't do this. But God walked me through this, and she healed. And then 6 months later, she had to have a second surgery to reconnect things. They reconnected it. It leaked. She went septic. Every day, we were in the hospital for 21 days. 21 days, the doctor would come, and the numbers just kept going up and up and up. And it was insane. The doctor would come in here and say, you are the sickest person in this hospital. You greet me with, hello, doc, how you doing? You should be in excruciating pain. And she wasn't. 21 days. She didn't eat for 21 days. They did this PICC line and what they call that, banana bag? They had her on a banana bag. And she didn't eat for 21 days to let her system heal. And then one day, the doctor's looking at the numbers, and she's looking at her, and he's looking. I said, you need emergency surgery, but you don't need emergency surgery. So we're going to go one more day. 21 days we walked this out. And then all of a sudden, the numbers came down. And as soon as the numbers came down, they discharged her. Now, that was about, she got hit with that on Good Friday. I remember that Easter Sunday with my older daughter, desperately trying to find a place to eat. We're having Easter dinner out of a vending machine because there was nothing open. I remember that being the loneliest Easter I've ever had. And I'm pleading to God, I don't understand this. I'll share something else that was, looking back, it was amusing. My other daughter, most of you know she's autistic. And I'm going to Kaylee. Kaylee, does Tabitha believe in the Easter Bunny anymore? Because we did the chocolate thing. We did the Easter egg hunt. You know, condemn me if you want, but we did that. That was our tradition. And I went to Tabitha. I says, Tabitha, do you believe in the Easter Bunny? And she looks at me. And that little snot looks at me and says, if I say I don't believe in the Easter Bunny, am I not going to get chocolate? And, you know, it's like, honey, let's go to the store. You buy whatever you want. My girls still talk about that time when their mother was sick. We'd go grocery shopping. And it's like, everybody got a cart. Go get what you want. They still talk about that. My wife would not let them eat things like sugary cereals and stuff. Dad didn't care. Cocoa Puffs with chocolate syrup, that was fair game. To this day, Kaylee cannot eat ramen noodles because they ate so many ramen noodles during that time. So we get through this. She's better. She in between operations, she actually went back to work with a colostomy bag. And let me tell you something. Colostomy bags are no fun. My daughter, but it was the thing that we went through for going on 6 months. And we did that as a family. And so we got through that. My wife recovers. And she's still recovering from that. That was a very traumatic experience. So she got sick Easter. A year later, she's doing better. The end of July, I'm passing out communion right here. I stepped up on that stage. I fell back. It sounded like a firecracker went off. You heard it. I know Jake went on drums that day. It went off like a firecracker and down I went. Totally snapped my Achilles tendon. And after the initial pain, the dynamite go off in my head, it didn't hurt anymore. I didn't understand it. Achilles tendon rupture like it was it's a game changer. It puts football players out of business. It's incredibly painful. It's one of the most painful things that can happen to a person. I walked out of this church to the emergency room. And the doctor, or I was actually a physician assistant, it was Greg. And Greg goes, how'd you walk in here? I don't know, it doesn't hurt. And he's showing me the x-rays and stuff, and ain't nothing hooked up down there, dude. Ain't nothing hooked up there. And they sit there and they go, okay, well, this is a sign from God. I'm going to get healed quick. You know, it's not hurting. So they have to wait a week for the swelling to go down, and I go see the surgeon, and I get an MRI. And the surgeon, I walk in without crutches to the surgeon's office, and he looks at me, and he's looking at the MRI, and he's looking at me, he's looking at the MRI. You just walked in here, didn't you? I says, yeah, can I go back to work? It wasn't hurting. No, dude. He showed me. He says, there's nothing hooking to your heel. How are you not in pain? Well, I take some Tylenol. He says, no, dude, you need surgery. So I had surgery. They did a reconnection. Achilles heel recovery is 6 months. 4 of it was in a cast. I was in a wheelchair. I didn't have disability insurance. I did it here. What was I going to do, sue the church? They had no money. So for 30 days, I sat on my porch with my dog. I fought with God. I was mad. You were supposed to heal me. I've got a family to take care of. I was in the middle of refinancing my home. Right square in the middle of refinancing. I had to come up with $3,000 to close the deal. You can't do this to me, God. Well, let me tell you some of the things that happened. I called the refinance people. I told them what was going on. And they said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it. They said, when you refinance your house, they skip a payment. We skipped 2. They worked it so they would slide it in. They got me 1 more month off on the payment. They picked up the closing cost. I refinanced my house for $300. I was saving $150 a month on my payment. And then it's like, okay, God, this is wonderful, this is great, but I still got bills coming in. I can't live on New York State disability at $37 a month or whatever it was. So I talked to my boss. Now I'm a service technician, been flying all over, driving all over the state since 1994. He says, well, what are you going to do? I'm going to make phone calls. I'm going to find work for the other guys. So I would wheel out to the front of the porch. I would sit on the front step. I would take this wheelchair, put it down 4 steps. I would park my truck so I could do 3 hops over to it. I would fold up the wheelchair standing on one leg, throw the wheelchair in the back seat of the truck, hop in. If any of you guys know the trucks I used to drive, that was a big freaking hop. And I would hop into this truck, and I would drive to work. And I drove to work down here. And I'd take the wheelchair out, and I'd go into work, and I would make phone calls. And I was getting my minimum pay, but that was good. That was about 70% what I would normally make, was just paying the bills. We were making it. I was flying that desk for about 2 months, still in a cast. And they came to me. There's a contractor in Buffalo. They want you to drive out, and they want you to solve this problem for it. And I'm looking at it, and it says, I've been to that site. It's all mud. I'm in a wheelchair. I can't do crutches across this mud. I can't do it. Well, this contractor wanted me to come out there so bad. They got a stack of plywood. And I pulled into the yard, and they started laying plywood all the way out. And I took the wheelchair, and I went all the way out to the job site. And it was like they'd take that one, and they'd throw it in front of me. They'd take that one, and they'd throw it out there. And I got out there. And then I get there, and I go, you brought me here for this? 15 minutes, I was done. It took me 2.5 hours to drive out there. 15 minutes, I had it solved. And it's like, that's why we wanted you. And I couldn't believe it. Well, now my boss knew I could get in the field. So they put me in a trainer's position. And I would go out with a junior guy. And I would supervise them. Hardest thing I ever did in my life. Because I couldn't get in there. Watching people do my job is like, just do it my way. Please listen to what I'm saying. So we did this for 6 months. Finally, the cast came off. I'm going, great. I can start walking again. My foot didn't work. It wouldn't move. It completely seized up. Now I had to go to the Chamber of Horrors that they call physical therapy. And I learned how to walk again. And I got back into it, and I was back in the field again in about a year. This is great. This is wonderful. Guess what? I'm $30,000 in debt again. I used a credit card to keep things floating while everything else was happening. 10,000 of it was in Cocoa Krispies my kids bought. I'm back in debt again. I'm going, God, this is no fun. This is not what I signed up for. What's funny, we paid that $30,000 off last year. It wasn't a lot of fun. So we're walking through this. So last year I'm paying off that debt. I'm doing great. I think things are great. God's on my side. Things are going great. I get COVID. And I don't get COVID like all of you got COVID. I went down hard. I spent 2 weeks at home, virtually in a coma. My wife couldn't make me do anything. It was awful. I wound up in a hospital. They took me out by ambulance. They said my blood oxygen was like 74. During this time, I was getting a vision from God. And when I first told Jake about it, I called it a marshmallow river because that's what it looked like. I realize now it was a river of death because the river was talking to me. Because I'm in the middle of this, for lack of a better term, it was a pus-filled river. It was death, it stunk. And I was hanging on this rock. And I was hanging on this rock in the middle of the river, and the river's talking to me. Let go, your pain is gone. Let go, your pain is gone. And for days, it would talk to me. And then eventually, and I just kept hanging on the rock. And eventually, I saw an angel come down and say, "This, hang in a little while longer. This sickness is not unto death." And then that's when they came in. At that point, they came in. They gave me oxygen, and all of a sudden, I was alert again. Everything was tunnel vision before that. I can't tell you what happened those 2 weeks I was at home. They took me to Oneida. It took me 3 hours. I sat in the ambulance for 3 hours waiting for them to find a room to get me into. I got into the emergency room. They put this oxygen on me and they put another thing of oxygen on me. I was like living in this wind tunnel. 2 days I lived in the emergency room. They couldn't find a room. It was that time. It was very bad. And then I went up to the room, and I was starting to recover. Things were going better. I was there 7 days, and they got me up and says, "You got to walk." Well, I hadn't walked in 3 weeks. I couldn't walk. I bluffed my way out of there. I said, "Just give me a cane. I'll do it with just a cane." And they let me out with just a cane. I went home that night. If you've ever been in the hospital for any length of time, what's the first thing you want to do when you get home after being in the shower, after you've been in the hospital for a week? You want to take a shower. I couldn't walk. From when my leg was damaged with the Achilles, I had a shower chair. My wife put the shower chair in, and I got into the shower. And it felt good. And then I dropped the washcloth, and I couldn't reach down and get it. And I'm going, "God, I can't go through this again. I can't." I literally was sitting in the shower crying. My wife didn't understand it. I'd sit there, and while I was in the hospital, 4 people died of COVID in the rooms adjoining me. I actually came out of there with like survivor's guilt. But I'm sitting in the shower. I can't even get out. My wife, you know her, she's little. I'm a big guy. There was no way she was getting me out of the shower if I couldn't do it under my own power. And I got out of the shower. I was just weeping like a little kid. Just totally humiliated that I was that weak again. And that was like 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. Actually, the week I got sick was 1 year ago today. I got back, I had nurses come into the house every day, taking my blood pressure and all that good stuff. I wound up going back to physical therapy, EA, and I learned how to walk again. This last year has been interesting because I have a new position in the company. What I learned to do when my leg was bad, now it's my permanent job. God has taught me so much humility through all the things that I've been through. And he didn't do a stinking thing the way I wanted him to do it. Not one thing. He didn't get me out of debt instantly. He didn't heal my leg instantly. But I learned so much about God and who he was. I spent a summer on the porch screaming at him, why did you do this to me? And I had one of those Job moments where it's like he answered me and he says, where were you? Where were you? I look back at that time when I was so sick, my leg was broken, and I couldn't walk. I asked myself, I talk to Pastor Jake all the time, and says, I look at that and says, was I even saved before that? My comprehension, my closeness to God grew so much time through every one of those hardships. Had I not gone through them, I'd have missed it all. So guys, I'm trying to tell you, things will not go the way you want to. You didn't want your daughter to go through all that. You didn't want to go through chemo. I know you didn't. We all go through things that we learn, we grow. There's two things we can do. We can either grow from these situations or we can just roll up and die. So many men just give up. I'm telling you what, it is humiliating to sit there and be in a hospital and crap the bed and have a nurse come in and clean you up because you can't freaking move. You want to talk about humility? You learn to do things differently. You really learn to hear the word of God. You learn to hear his voice. There's another story I want to share. This guy was mountain climbing. Him and his partner, they were going up this glacier. And they were tied together. And the other guy fell. And they fell into this. It was about dark. They were lost. They got lost up on the mountain. They fell into this chasm. The other guy dies. The other guy's hanging by a rope in the dark. And he's pleading to God. Get me out of this, God. Please get me out of this. Bill's dead. I don't want to die. Please come help me. And God spoke to him. And God said, cut the rope. So what's he do? He rebukes the devil. He rebukes the devil. And he starts praying again. God answers a second time. Cut the rope. He rebukes it again. They found him. About a week later, hanging in this crevice, 6 inches from the ground. If he'd have cut the rope, he'd have saved himself. But you know what the thing, I sit there and I look at that, he didn't know the Lord's voice. He didn't know the Lord's voice. He wasn't in the Word. He wasn't He wasn't worshiping like we were doing tonight. He didn't know who the Lord was. So when the Lord spoke to him, he thought it was the enemy. And God just said, cut the rope. So with that, I want to encourage, if anybody, there's another Bible verse, walking in faith is such a difficult thing. I look at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They are my faith heroes. They sit there and they stood in front of the king and said, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If it be so, if this be so, our God who we serve is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand. But if not, let it be known to you, we will not bow our knee to your golden image." He pretty much knew he was dead. He knew God could save him. The three of them went into the fire. And God met them there. God met them there. What's funny is I love this verse, and I'm going to break into tears probably when I tell this next story. In World War II, before the U.S. got into the World War II, there was called the Battle of Battle of Dunkirk. The movie was good, had nothing to do with what happened in real life. They were trapped. They were pinned down, just like in the movie. They had no way of escape. They sent a message. They sent a message out. An admiral sent a message to him and said, "How you holding out?" And they sent a 3-word message back. "But if not." That's all they responded. The beauty of the story is they spread the word that that's what they said. And everybody knew their Bibles. Everybody knew that story. Everybody knew that story, that they were in desperate faith. Things happened. This was this rescue of 1,000 small ships. They were going over there with fishing boats. All these little, just like the movie did. That was accurate. But if not, the thing the movie leaves out was the tank stopped. They can't explain why the tanks stopped advancing. They were pinned down. They'd have been done in 24 hours had they kept moving, but they stopped. And they gave them enough time for these little boats to come across the English Channel in the worst time of the year, and the English Channel was like glass. The stormiest season, English Channel was like glass. 6-foot freaking dinghies going across the English Channel, bringing back 2 or 3 soldiers. Let me tell you something. When you know the Word of God, miracles happen. When you have it this down deep inside you, miracles happen. Things we don't understand. The beauty of faith is in the scriptures, there's 2 or 3 examples. The apostles asked for more faith, and Jesus gave it to him. I love the Father that said, Jesus said to him, "What do you mean? If you believe, I can do it?" And the Father responded, "I believe, help me with my unbelief."